So it's been a while since we had a Starship and Starbase update. So let's quickly run through what's happened over the last few weeks. So the launch tower is pretty much completed. The chopsticks or catch arms has been attached and seems to be working properly. Most of the infrastructure is completed. I know there's some work left to be done, or they still need to start with the water deluge system, which is a sound suppression system that uses water when the booster takes off. So there's a few developments that took place over the last few weeks. Elon Musk actually tweeted a while back that they should be able to launch within the next month. In other words, within November. But for some reason, doubt that's going to happen, even if they do get FAA approval. So I did previously state that red tape is holding up developments, and that is true. But there is still some work to be done in terms of the launch support infrastructure. The fuel farm has pretty much been completed, and there has been a number of static fire tests on the Starship itself. Starship 20 had two separate static fires, one with the vacuum Raptor engines and one with the normal Raptor engines. Now there's 3 vacuum Raptor engines on a Starship and 3 normal Raptor engines on a Starship. The vacuum Raptors are used to propel the Starship into space and into the correct orbit, whichever orbit that might be. So there was 2 separate static fire tests. As far as I know, there was no static fire involving all 6 of these engines at once. There's been no static fires with the booster as of yet. So booster number 4 is pretty much completed and waiting for the go-ahead from the FAA in terms of approvals. There's also environmental impact studies that needs to be completed before the FAA will give approval to this launch. So the orbiter launch could potentially take place in this year, but it's still more likely to take place probably by March in 2022. Let's hope the approvals come through very soon so we can see this beast take off and become the most powerful rocket booster ever to take off. But you can be assured, as soon as there is a launch attempt of this booster number 4 and ship 20, I will be covering it live. This would truly be a big moment in terms of heavy lift vehicles launching into space, and if this is successful, it might end up changing the whole entire space race or space industry as we know it. Now there's a number of things that might end up delaying the Starship, and one of them is environmental concerns. And to get to that, I'm not going to get into too much details because I don't want to be throttled in terms of viewership. But just a quick quiz in that regard. Do you know who the biggest polluter on Earth is? If you looked at the mainstream media, you would probably consider that would be the United States. But in fact, that's totally not the truth. China is in fact number 1 in terms of releasing greenhouse gases into the atmosphere by a large margin. The United States population grew with tens of millions over the last 30 or so years, and they still managed to reduce their greenhouse emissions by close to 30%. That's quite an achievement, and many people don't actually realize that not all green energy is actually green. The products that you use to make these batteries and the processes that needs to be followed also has an environmental impact, and there's many people that seem to forget this and don't really pay close attention. Some environmentalists, now before you jump to conclusions, I am totally pro conserving the environment and preserving the earth and being careful of what we release into the atmosphere. But there's a point where you have to realize that sometimes green is not always green. It's good to strive to get to a point where we have 0 emissions, I guess, but we need to be careful of making judgments based on or potentially skewed information. Many people would argue that launching large objects on a regular basis like the Starship is a threat to the world environment and specifically greenhouse gases. Do you realize what this could mean for the future of humanity in terms of preserving the Earth and the atmosphere and the well-being of our planet. All the statistics, or most or many of the statistics that they use to fight global temperature changes, if we can put it like that, and environmental issues. Many of the tools that they use to fight environmental impact in terms of humanity's environmental impact on the Earth, whether it be in the oceans or in the atmosphere, are thanks to advancements in the space industry. And in my opinion, the advancements outweigh the potential impact on the atmosphere. The technology used to monitor the retreating of ice sheets across the world, the amount of CO2s and gases in the atmosphere, are thanks to space-based technologies. If we didn't have that, we would not be able to fight this battle as comprehensively as we currently do. And there's actually even potential to build power stations in space. This might sound unbelievable, but once you've got a heavy lift system that you can use to launch heavy objects into space, you can actually build an entire solar farm in space. And thanks to heavy lift systems, this is actually a potential possibility. You could power multiple cities using such technology. Look, there's lots of advancements that still needs to be made. And don't be mistaken, it's not going to be easy, but the possibility is there now that we could change how we obtain our energy to grow humanity as a species. And because of advancements in space, it might enable us to save this planet. Now, there's a link to be made between certain advocates for nature conservation, not just nature conservation. I'm pro nature conservation, but I've even seen some people drawing parallels to advancement in space and, believe it or not, racism, which is totally ridiculous. And I've seen that's one of the things that's actually polarizing people even more. That's why many people refuse to associate themselves with anything related to conservation of the atmosphere, of nature in general, because they see these people that voice concerns, but in the same time, in the same breath as they're voicing their concerns for nature and our impact on nature, they basically say ridiculous things and draw parallels between racism and conservation of the earth, which is just ludicrous. And as soon as someone does that, I don't tend to take them seriously, and many people with common sense tend to not take them seriously, and their argument flies out the window. I'm not going to go into too much details in regards to that or those parallels being drawn, but take a look at how they are pressuring certain Western countries into complying to certain obligations, or forcing people or countries, specific countries, to oblige and, as it were, bow the knee to certain supposed regulations or obligations that they force people to make. How could that be? That the country with the worst track record in terms of polluting the atmosphere is not ever touched, or no one actually says a word about their pollution, and the rest of the Western world has to bow the knee. That does not make sense in my book. How can you just ignore that? In fact, China is building a coal power plant literally every month, and there's not a word being said about this. In fact, clean energies do exist. If you have the knowledge and you have the will, it can be done. And I'm not just talking about solar and wind farms, which is not necessarily green energy or purely green energy. Not bad-mouthing those industries, because there's definitely a future for them. But the fact remains that nuclear energy is now, or has now, become much more safe than it used to be. And if you have the expertise to do it, you could do it safely. And it's no longer that much of an issue. Nuclear energy is actually much more green than they would like to admit. The advancements that has been made over the last couple of years has proven this. If it's done correctly, it's still the best form of energy. And I believe advancements in the next 10 or 20 years could even mean that we are no longer reliant on nuclear energy. But only the future will know, so let's wait and see in that regard. But if we support the space industry, not just the space industry, but also sectors that are involved in advancement of technologies in this regard, if we do it objectively and governments play their parts, not going to say much about the media's role in this aspect. If you tend to applaud people that bend the knee because you told them to bend the knee, there's something wrong with you. If you are the media and you control the narrative that's being pushed, you know how much power you have and you know how much damage you could potentially cause. Don't bend the knee. Support freedom of all humanity. Support development of humanity as a whole. All industries have a part to play, and we need to be aware of the facts, not just the facts that are pushed upon us. We need to do our own research so we can understand where the world is going in terms of advancement and technology. We are creating our own reality, and it's time that we get back to the basics. We look at the facts on the table and we realize that there's more to life than just what we are being told. Open your eyes. So space is definitely one part in the development of humanity that cannot be held back. It needs to develop at a steady pace, and I don't think putting on the brakes because of narratives that's being pushed by the media is a good way to go. So let's hope that Starship takes off within the next 3 or 4 months and it's a success. In terms of future Starships, booster number 5 and ship number 21 is going along quite nicely. I believe by the time that ship 20 launches with booster number 4, the next booster and Starship will be ready for launch. So let's hope that development keeps on going as it is currently, and that the launch support tower is finally up and ready to get this lady into space. I'm not going to entertain you with any bad rock or music covers today. I'm going to leave that for a later date. Hope you are all well and have a fantastic week, and thanks for joining me on this Starship update. Thanks and goodbye.